Hello and welcome back to the broadcast, episode 33. Today we're talking all things Comrades Ultra Marathon. So you've probably seen across all the different various social media platforms, if you have managed to stumble across this, that myself and 8 others have just been in South Africa to complete one of the world's oldest ultra marathons, which is a 90-kilometer ultra marathon from Pietermaritzburg to Durban. So we've just been across in South Africa for 2 weeks and have had lots of questions about training for an ultra marathon, also completing an ultra marathon, and also just everything in between. So I figured it was worth jumping back onto the broadcast just to talk about all things running comrades. So yeah, it's absolutely great to be back in Dubai. Managed to get out and do some training, which was the first training that I have done since the ultra marathon this morning, which was a nice easy cycle, getting the legs back moving again. Opted to take an optional 2 week break between this block and the next, just as a bit of a mental and physical one, ready to get ready running already next week. I'm pretty sure I could get out running now, but just doing the sensible thing and the smart approach, taking it nice and easy between now and the next block. The next block we're looking at is a big marathon block where I'm going to hopefully go and attempt to try and get a PB and hopefully take the marathon training a bit more seriously, which hopefully on the back of a bit of Comrades volume, that should lead into that pretty nicely. Yeah, so to talk about it first, we want to talk about the training block itself for the ultra. Broke it down and focused basically on doing a volume approach when it came to the actual ultra, rather than do too much speed work. Everything was mainly focused on time on the feet. Our longest run for the guys was ended up being a 56-kilometer long run. For myself, it was a 42-kilometer our marathon, Prague Marathon. So what I tried to do throughout the week, just with obviously being busy coaching and other mornings being taken up, what I tried to do was split up the mileage into as many different runs as possible, with the aim of getting the highest possible weekly mileage across the week. So what that looked like at the start of the block was between 50 and 60 kilometers is where I came into the main Comrades block. Now, the reason that my mileage was so low going into it is because I wasn't sure that 100% I wanted to run the race, if I'm being brutally honest. So I was sort of just avoiding doing the sort of big distance. But the fact that normally I'm looking between sort of 10 and 14 hours training a week across running, cycling, gymming, maybe a few more hours if you add in the gym stuff, I was able to sort of up the mileage pretty quickly. I steadily ramped it up. As the rule generally goes, you try to look to add no more than 10% per week onto your weekly mileage, and then you try to add no more than 10% onto your overall mileage on the long runs on the weekend. However, with the reduced volume on the bike going down and with other strength sessions such as high rocks and conditioning sessions going down, I was able to easily add up a bit more like 15 to 20% in the initial stages. So the way that I did it, it looked a bit more like sort of around 60 kilometers, then 70, 80. I did a video on my Instagram breaking down exactly the amount of kilometers that I did in the weeks leading up to it. So I was able to gradually add that mileage in, all sort of accumulating around a maximum total of 110 kilometers for the week. Now, I know that a lot of people say that they've said to me when I did that post originally, they said that sounds like a lot of miles. And obviously it is if you're only running 20, 30 kilometers. But the way that I sort of structure it, and I try to structure my athletes' plans, is by slowly building up the mileage in lots of small runs. So if I said to you to go out and chew out a 15-kilometer run on a Tuesday, you might find that very difficult. However, if I asked you to go on Tuesday morning and run 7.5 kilometers before work, and then asked you to go and run another 7.5 kilometers after work, that sort of makes it a bit more manageable, lets your body sort of manage the load a bit better without becoming overly fatigued. That's personally my opinion and the way that I prefer it. Some people prefer to do longer mileage and have a bit more breaks between each one. However, for me, I know that I generally cope with it a bit better if I break it down like that. So, if you look about 6 weeks out, like I said, I was around 51 kilometers for the week, and then we jumped up to around 78. So that was looking at a 9.6 kilometer fartlek session on the Monday, a 10K run, and then I did a 7K run in the morning, 7K run at night, 10K run. I had my long run at the weekend, which actually didn't go that well. I ended up calling short, and then finished off the rest of the miles on the Sunday. The next week, did 85 kilometers with a 5K easy run, a 12K run on the Tuesday, a morning run and an evening run on the Wednesday again. This is actually where I flew out to Germany. I did a 10K run. I did on the Saturday 2 5K runs, and then I broke actually the Saturday run. We did a race in the morning. So I did a shakeout run, a race, 5K race, and then a bit of a longer run. And then on the Sunday, I did a 7K. This is the week that I went to Prague. I did a 6K, an 8K, a 5K, and a 10K on the Wednesday as a double. Another 10K on the Thursday. I had the Friday off as we traveled to Prague, a shakeout run of 6K on the Saturday, and then the marathon on the Sunday. We broke the main long runs of the Prague Marathon down into 2K runs. Now, unfortunately, I had work on the Saturday, so I wasn't able to do the runs back to back Saturday, Sunday. However, I mean, as long as you get the mileage done, it doesn't really matter too much. I managed to do 30 kilometers on the Friday and 30 kilometers on the Saturday. The next week, much the same distance. We increased the distance during the week, so I did two 16Ks during the week, a 25 and a 15K on the weekend. And then for the following week was just the week before we flew out, was two 15Ks with the mileage coming real down. Now, one of the main sort of things and learnings that I made when we did this block was I tapered a bit too hard and probably cut the mileage down. That week between the 19th and 25th of May, which was 2 full weeks before the race, I actually only did 5K for that week, which for the volume from jumping down from the week before, doing 110 kilometers for that week, was probably a bit too much. Now, it left me feeling sluggish, left me feel like I need to do a bit more. So sort of notes for next time, I know that I need to sort of keep that volume up, maybe keep a bit of intensity in there too. The week before the race, so this is actually when we were in the bush in South Africa. If you've not watched the video that I put up on that, we went into safari. You can see that I didn't do much run. We did much running. We did two short runs that week of total of 14 kilometers. Now again, this obviously wasn't ideal. The fact we were staying in the bush meant that there wasn't really opportunity for us to go on many runs, or if there was, we didn't take them. So obviously not really ideal, but it is what it is. We managed to go out and do a run on the week of it, and then we did the race on the Sunday. Sorry, I've messed up those weeks. The week when they were in the bush was on the week of the 2nd to the 8th. The week before was the week when we travelled out, and I just didn't do that much, to be honest. I've managed to travel out on the Friday, the race being on the Sunday, so sorry, I messed that up a bit. But I'm sure you'll forgive me. But basically, something to touch on, as well as all those running sessions, I was making sure that I was hitting at least 2 good quality strength or cross-training sessions a week. And that was a lot of focus on single leg drills and a lot of focus on stability drills. Obviously, having worked in the gym previously, these are things that I was sort of carrying on and making sure that I was focusing on. And as the taper came down, I actually increased the strength sessions, reduced the intensity of the strength session, and make sure that I carried on what I was doing. But this was really important, along with bi-weekly hill sessions, and we were also making sure that we included hill sessions in the weekends of the run. Now, for those of you that don't know about Comrades, the actual run itself is a super hilly run. So on the activity that we did in the 90 kilometers that we did was a total elevation of 1,173, or just under 1,200 meters. But that doesn't tell the full picture, because actually we had 1,800 meters of the down. This is the year of the down run. Just if you don't know about the race history, one year they run from Durban to Pietermaritzburg, which is known as the up run, which has 1,800 meters elevation, 1,200 meters of down, and then the opposite is true in reverse. So this year we did 1,200 meters up and 1,800 meters down. Now, If you've never done a lot of downhill running before, if you've done a lot of trail running, you will know this plays massive. It wreaks havoc on your quads, on your calves, your knees, and this can be often where people unravel. Obviously, I didn't get the best time. There's people out there who are absolutely smashing it, but time relative to my ability, I feel like I performed well because I had strength trained well and also I'd done a lot of hill training. So your body is, only conditioned to the work that you sort of put it through. So if you don't do any hill training, you don't do any strength training, you're obviously not going to be conditioned for that kind of work. So it's something to take note of if you are going to do the Comrades training, and something that I would emphasize if I was coaching you for something like this, to make sure that you put in that hill work, put in the sort of the strength stuff and the double days, and make sure you get your program. And obviously, as I said, I ended up tapering, although I did taper probably a bit too hard. Now, this, doesn't just carry on from this one block, didn't just define how well I did. This is also years of strength training, years of working in the gym, years of doing lots of different running that got me to this point. Now, if you were a fresh runner and wanted to take on a challenge like this, you might not be able to just step into it 6 weeks out like I did. You may have to sort of roll back and say, right, what is my experience in running? What is, how does my run look like this? It's, maybe not going to be the same as someone like myself, who's obviously a bit more experienced. I've got a couple of ultras under my belt and multiple marathons and things like this. So for me, this was probably more about a mental challenge. Although the 90 kilometers was the longest I've ever run, and I knew it was going to be difficult, it was certainly a different challenge compared to someone who's probably going to step into this. So yeah, race prep for the week, obviously something that I've spoke about multiple times. We're 33 podcasts in. I've probably done at least 5 podcasts on carb loading, what to eat before a marathon, what to eat before an ultra endurance. So I'm just going to say it again. You need to carbs. You need to make sure that you're carb loading. I think one of the main differences between myself, maybe some of the other runners that were doing it, I had a strong nutrition strategy of making sure that I had at least 10 to 12 grams of carbs per kilo of body weight the day and 2 days leading into the race. And that meant almost constant eating, grazing, everything carbohydrates for 2 days out. Now, you're obviously not eating to go on Mr. Olympia bodybuilding show. You might look like rubbish, you might feel like rubbish, but ultimately eating all those carbs, topping up your glycogen stores, making sure you're feeling fueled, ready for the performance. Now, that is probably one of the most important things for race day, and probably one of the main reasons I feel like I didn't suffer from any cramps or any sort of extra fatigue in the legs. So it's super important to make sure you go and do that. So I'd say that was probably one of my key takeaways to tell people for the race, especially if you're going to do the down run. Make sure that you fuel up 2 days before. Now, these are simple fueling hacks, so make sure you're eating regularly, lots of fruit, lots of simple carbohydrates. I did even the day before, lots of packets of easy noodles, things like that have 20, 30 grams of carbs at a time. If you stop at a restaurant, you're able to get a Coca-Cola, you're able to get an apple juice if you want something a bit more natural rather than sort of processed. Bananas, carb bars, all these things you can get in before. You can only control what you can control on the race day. Obviously, things can go wrong, but these days before, you know exactly what you're going to eat. You have it all laid out. And obviously, I'm happy to hear or answer any questions for anyone who's thinking about doing a race like this if they were looking for any advice. So obviously, the rest of the things you can't control. You can't control the weather. We were lucky on the day that it was super nice weather, so we didn't have to worry too much about excess cramping, sweating, extra salts to do. We did our electrolytes on the day itself, which I'll talk about actually on the race day strategy. Arriving at the race, making sure you've got the right kit. These are all things that you can control. The kit is the things that you can control, but things like the weather you can't control. So obviously there's nothing you can do about that. We're just lucky that it went really well. So I want to talk a bit about race day strategy. So having never done this race before, the best thing you can do is listen to somebody with a bit of advice for you, somebody who's done it multiple times. So we watched the race briefing with multiple winner Herda Stein, who did the race briefing for the race. Also lots of information on YouTube. Hopefully videos like these will be able to help people, but we researched and we generally found that everybody said you have to start this race like a coward and finish like a hero. So that's exactly what we did. From the very start, when we left Pietermaritzburg, we left and we did no intensity. We were completely chilled out. We were probably around zone 1 heart rate. Even on the smallest inclines, where people were running past us, and running past myself. We made sure that we walked every single uphill from the start. Now, this averaged out our time. We were probably looking at the start between, say, 6:45 and 7-minute kilometers for probably the first 30, 40 kilometers. Now, I know that sounds super slow. We had set out to plan to go for a 9 hours 30, which is around a 6:15 pace, if I'm not mistaken. So we just said, right, we're just going to chill out. We know that the downhills are coming in the second half after 60k. So what can we do is we can control our pace in the first half. So the main thing you can do is control your pace, control your effort, and stay on top of your hydration and your nutrition. Hydration also includes taking on your electrolytes and salt tablets. Now, this race is probably one of the best prepared races in terms of nutrition and hydration you could ever imagine. So anytime you do a marathon, there might be 6, 7, 8 aid stations. This race, every 3, 4 kilometers, there's people on the side of the road giving you bananas, potatoes, salt, tablets, sweets. You could potentially even run this race without carrying on hydration or without carrying any carbs. But like I said, you want to control what you're able to control in your environment. So what I did, sorry, was we had a bottle drop station. So I was able to put a 90-gram carb mix every 20 kilometers or so from the start. I was able to carry my own gels from the start with ones in a bag at each station, so that if for whatever reason the ones that I was carrying were running out, then I was able to pick ones up. And then I was also staying on top of my hydration with electrolytes with my Revive sachets. I had 3,000 milligrams of salt in a water bottle in my back pocket, which I was able to sip regularly, even from the start when I wasn't exactly needing it. Now, if you overhydrate with salt, you're just going to pee it out. Now, if you overhydrate with water, you can risk hyponatremia, which is overhydration with water, which is something you can be which can lead to a bit of a disaster. So, anyone can correct me on this, but basically, if you overhydrate with salt, it's not dangerous. Overhydrate with water, it can be dangerous. So that's why I was making sure I was taking in very little water, which was probably about 400 mils of water with such a high concentration of salt, which I was able to take on regularly. For the race strategy in terms of nutrition, I did what most people are doing, which is going towards a higher carb intake. Between the races, obviously, it differed between the different hours. At the start, I was doing between sort of 90 and 100 grams of carbs per hour, and then maybe in the middle part, I was maybe doing up to 120 grams. Now, my stomach can tolerate it. I'm happy. I'm also sort of accept on these big races if I have sort of stomach issues, there's plenty of toilets, there's plenty of areas that I can go and utilize to sort of use the toilet, just get that out. And these are things that happen. I'm not embarrassed if there's any sort of stomach problems, and I've never really had a stomach issue before on this level of carbs. So whenever I go past an aid station, if there's somebody handing out sweets or oranges, it's a chance to get 5 to 10 grams of extra carbs in. I'll often do that. So when I say 90 grams of carbs, I'm probably treating that as the basement of total carbs that I'm having in a race like this. Now, a lot of people might say that's too much. I'm fine with 60 grams of carbs, and obviously that's absolutely fine if that's where you want to stick and that's what you're fine with. If you're a bit of a lighter athlete, I find that athletes that are a bit heavier, you might have, although you might have more fat stores, you might require more fueling. Like a 50-kilogram woman, like for example, Gerda Steen says that she has 60 grams of carbs, and that's absolutely sufficient for her. She doesn't need any more, and that's absolutely fine. Someone like myself, I was able to take on a bit more, and that was fine. I'm fueling for my race performance. I'm not fueling for hers. So what works for one person might not work for another, but just generally what worked for me. Obviously, the aid stations, like I said, were really, really well stocked, and it was really good to get extra stuff on there. So thanks very much to the Dolphin Coast Striders, the guys who we linked up with, and were able to get the stuff, our carbs and stuff out there for the day. So that made it super easy for the race strategy, not to have to carry too much stuff. I literally carried my race marathon belt with, like I said, 500 mils of water and probably about 12 to 15 gels, which is probably what I'd race for the marathon anyway, and had my phone on, which I was able to record some nice content. So if you've not seen the content of the race, you can obviously check it out, which all the guys did it. So shout out to all the guys who did the race. So Tom, Claudia, Issy, Harrison, Hamish, Imogen, Bradley, and then obviously Eloise for supporting us as well. That was obviously fantastic to have everyone out there. I did run most of the race with Tom, which you'll see on the race video. So thanks very much to him for supporting me all the way through. I think it makes a massive difference, and the experience of these races to run with someone just makes such a difference. And that's definitely one of my race takeaways, is try and find someone that you're going to race with and go race with. Because I'm going to tell you, the first 60 kilometers were a lot easier running with him, knowing that we were doing the same pace, we had the same goal. It was a lot easier than the last 40 kilometers where I was running on mostly on my own. Obviously, thousands and thousands of other runners, 23,000 other people. But the fact I didn't know any of them, you've not got the camaraderie, you've not got the banter. It's obviously not the same. So that's something that I would just sort of recommend, to try and get a friend, someone to run it with you. And obviously having the whole group, knowing that these people had people ahead of me, had people behind. So that was really, really good. So yeah, one thing that I want to talk about is just obviously the mental structure of running a 90k ultra marathon. It's not the same as running a marathon, although that is going to have some sort of mental battle. I would say the marathon probably has one mental battle in it, which is normally comes between 30-35 kilometers. My normal saying, which we say between the guys, is the last 5 to 10% of any race is going to be hard, whether it's a 5k marathon ultra. But with an ultra, you normally have two or three ups and downs. It's more of a roller coaster rather than a sort of up and down of a hill, where once you get over the hill and you burst through the wall, as you probably heard this like mentioned, I would say I probably had a struggle at 3K when I realized my legs weren't as strong. I had a good moment at about 5K where I felt my legs, had come back to me, and the early carbing felt really good. And then back, struggling again, 55, 60, I felt great when we seen our local supporters. So all the guys like Claudia's parents had came out, Brad's parents had came out to support us. And you'll see that on the video when we see them. And obviously I had other highs, like sort of micro highs and lows, where we passed through different aid stations, passed through cheering sections, which you'll see. There was dancers, there was people on the streets, and going through that mental battle and taking the highs and lows is something different from the ultra. I always say to people, like, you have to have mantras when you're doing these races. You have to have positive things that you're going to say to yourself, whether that's you write it on your arm. But I always try and say you must vocalize it. So when you're running along, when I felt really good at 60 to 70 kilometers, when we started going on the downhills, I make sure to actually verbalize and vocalize how I'm feeling. So I'm feeling great. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling strong. And then also at moments where you're feeling low, also vocalize. You want to say, I've done the training. I've done the training. You're not going to lie to yourself, because actually lying to yourself in this instance has been proven to sort of not really work. You don't say, I'm feeling strong when I'm feeling weak. You want to say positive thoughts. Things like, I've done the training, I can do this, this is a tough moment, but I'm going to come back stronger. I'm going to come good. Focus on what you can control in these moments. Like, make sure you're taking on your fueling, and actually take a moment to sort of step back. Like in this races, you're seeing people of South Africa who have made this race so special. And you might be running through towns where people are sort of maybe slightly less fortunate than we are. Anybody who's watching this, you don't have the ability to fly around the world and do a race and take for granted that you're putting one foot in front of the other. You have, race shoes, you have these problems that are not really, they're made up problems, so take strength from, and take encouragement and positives from all these different things that are happening in the race. So that's one thing that I would say plays a massive difference, and something that I'm really evolving and getting better in my own races, where I'm really starting to verbalize. I mean, these people might think you're crazy running in an ultra marathon, saying out loud, I feel strong, I feel powerful, I feel like I'm really doing well. But I mean, ultimately, you're never going to see these people again. They might take strength, and they might take in, sort of something from you. This person said, oh, they're feeling good, and they cruise past you at 60k. So something that I would sort of say, give it a go. Even on your next training run, let yourself know how you're feeling, speak it out loud. Like, your brain will listen to you when you start to, you and your brain are not different things, by the way, but you start to listen to these things when you start saying them out loud, and it starts becoming true. So talk about what I do differently on the Comrades. So in terms of my pacing strategy, I would say that I pretty much got it spot on. I walked over the line and probably said that I don't have that much more to give, given the late training block and my time of 9:57:01. I'm super happy with. So I came away with my Robert Mitchell medal, which was really, really proud of and was the one that I was targeting. The A goal originally was 9 hours and 30 minutes, but sort of the difficulties I ran into in the last 6, 7K meant that there was no chance that I was able to maintain the pace that I'd sort of set with about 7Ks to go. So when I crossed the line and able to get that medal, I could not have been more proud of myself and, was really happy. So yeah, but what I'd do differently, I think I would have done more downhill training. Although my legs coped well, I was able to make up a lot of time. But what I would have done was actually practice pacing on tired legs. So what that might look like in a session, I might do a 30K session with 5K at the end, focused on walk the uphills and run the downhills hard. And that's something I didn't do. And one of the sort of pre-Comrades runners, Camille Heron, had said on her Instagram, and something that I maybe wish I'd listened to, is run those downhills and practice them. I'd done a lot of uphill running, but to be honest, I didn't run a single uphill from kilometer 1 to kilometer 90. I walked every single uphill. So, there was no real need to practice that uphill running, to be honest. I would have benefited better from probably doing a practice session of, say, hill sprints down with walk uphills, active recovery. But that's a lesson learned. Next year, we're going for the up run. So I'll probably need to practice running uphill a bit more. That's something that I sort of wish that I'd practiced. What I'd do differently the week before, like I said, we were in the wilderness of South Africa. We were staying with friends. We were going out for drinks. We were eating, I maybe would have focused the week before. I wouldn't have probably went as hard on the alcohol. That's something that I did. I enjoyed it at the time, but if I was to race the race better and be honest with myself, that's probably not the best preparation. But we also had a great time, so there's a sort of give and take with that. The other thing, yeah, so that's basically what I would have said. And then, as I'd mentioned before, the last thing was I tapered too hard. I wish I'd kept some intensity. And then the week before, I wish I'd taken more chance to do some more runs. So yeah, that was that. So my final thoughts on the Comrades was definitely one of the best races I've ever done, probably the best. I'd say definitely up there with London Marathon. 90 kilometers of people cheering you on the streets, 90 kilometers of just absolute joy, people dancing, people having a great time, absolutely fantastic experience. I don't really have any negatives to say about the race. The start was pretty hectic, but I'll sort of let anyone can let me know if they've ever done a major marathon or major event that hasn't been complete disaster at the start. Obviously, there was no toilets, there was no things like this, but to be honest, people were just doing their business on the street, so it is what it is. But yeah, absolutely fantastic race. And the main questions everyone's asked me, you get a special medal for back to back. Would I do it again? Absolutely. Next year we have guaranteed that I'm going to go back, even if it's not as for a fantastic trip like we did here. So I would say absolutely I'm in for the race again. One of the best races I've ever done. And yeah, also as part of the closing statements, massive thanks to Claudia and Brad and all their families, the guys who looked after me and the rest of the guys on our trip. Massively looked after us well, and like the hospitality of South Africans is just always unmatched. Like these guys go out their way massively to look after us, let us stay in their places, all the different runners out there. Dolphin Coast Striders looked after us really well with the race nutrition, allowed us to join their shakeout runs and stuff. So if you've never been to South Africa as a country, it's definitely somewhere I'd recommend to go. Comrades as a whole is something I would recommend to do. So that was a sort of brief overview. I feel like I could talk about the race forever and have done to everyone who will listen. But if you are considering the Comrades, I'd definitely give it a go. I would be interested to hear as well if you are thinking about doing any ultras coming up. It would be good to hear from you what you're going to do or what races you got to do. Now it's the UAE summer. We're focusing, like I said, on a bit of a marathon block to come up. I've got the last week of chilling out to come before that goes. I've got lots of runners who are heading to Berlin for the marathon, so we're all gearing up for a period of summer marathon training, which is going to be super tough and something that we're looking forward to. Luckily, I have invested in a bit of a treadmill for lots of summer training, and also I'm back in the UK for a month too, so we'll be able to catch up with lots of people for runs there and be able to get some decent mileage in. So hopefully be able to vlog lots of different stuff. I'm always looking forward for people to come on the podcast to talk about their running experience. If you're interested in coming on, then please do drop me a message, or if there's anything you want me to talk about on the podcast itself, then I would absolutely love to hear from you. So thanks very much for tuning into the broadcast number 33, Comrades Marathon Special, and appreciate everyone who listens to this and takes the time to, out of their day to listen to this. So I appreciate it, and happy running, and I'm sure I'll catch up with you either on social media or if you come to any of the runs that we do here in Dubai. If not, then drop me a message down below here. So thank you very much, and see you on the next one.